Good morning, everyone. How y'all doing? I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. Well, thank you all for being here in person and both online. We are streaming on YouTube as well. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. I want to introduce myself and very delighted to introduce today's workshop presenter. So my name is Jamelia Hardley. I am the director for the Woodrick Center for Inclusion and Multicultural Affairs. Super excited for today's presenter. Super excited to see you all. Just a couple things before I move forward. We do have brunch for you all free in rooms 122, 124. So please help yourself at the conclusion of the workshop, or if you want to take a break and get something to drink or snack on, you're more than welcome to do so. So, in an event of the connections of Black History Month, Women's History Month, and all the things in between, we were excited to invite today's speaker slash workshop presenter for today's workshop. So let me introduce you to Della Marie Levi. Has over 25 years of experience in the social work field. She has served as a foster care case manager, foster home licenser, and recipient rights advisor for emotionally impaired and disadvantaged teens, and drug and alcohol prevention education program facilitator for middle school and high school students for urban areas. De La Marie is currently employed as a part time family advocate for a local nonprofit agency and part time instructor in the Family and Consumer Sciences Department at Western Michigan University. In addition to the aforementioned, De La Marie is the creator of Embracing, Educating, and Empowering Black Boys and Girls, a village education program for parents, guardians, caregivers, and people who work with Black children ages 10 to 17. The program provides solution focused and practical research based information that helps Black children not only survive, but thrive in society. De La Marie has set or spent sharing time time sharing information in various educational settings and trainings and sessions. De La Marie is the mother of one adult child, as well as a creative educator, visionary, entrepreneur, forward thinker, old school hip hop connoisseur, owner of De La Soul Records, DJ, beekeeper in training, and a fierce social justice advocate. Lastly, De La Marie is an urban food grower, hashtag Black Farmer Bay, who has over 6 years experience growing her own food and leading workshops in the community about food growing and setting up and maintaining community gardens. A focus area that she takes great pride in is facilitating workshops about the history and legacy of Black farming. De La Marie believes that since we all have been given the opportunity to live, breathe, and exist, it is crucial that we walk boldly, proudly, and confidently in the power that dwells within. Please join me and give us a warm welcome, De La Marie.
Thank you all so much for being here today. Some familiar faces, some not so familiar faces. Again, as she says, I am Della Marie. There's a lot of things behind my name, but the bottom line, I'm just a regular person who loves to grow food, who loves to chase her dreams, to listen to vinyl records. And also, I am a beekeeper in training. Yes, in my backyard, I have honeybees. And so this season, I am hoping that they produce a lot so that I can enjoy that and also my community can enjoy it. I want to start off with this beautiful poem out of the book We Are Each Other's Harvest. It is a book by Natalie Brazil, and it's celebrating African American farmers, land, and legacy. One of the quotes that she starts the book off with is from one of my favorite writers, who is Gwendolyn Brooks, and it's from her poem called Paul Robeson. It says, "We are each other's harvest, we are each other's business, and we are each other's magnitude and bond." And this is a love letter to future generations by Naima Pennyman. A flower comes before fruit. Love precedes a child. Someone was dreaming of you with a womb full of water and seeds and stars, a drum skin stretched over a full moon. One heart becomes two, one seed becomes 100. You are the result of countless love stories and unnumbered feats of overcoming. Can you hear your mother humming you to sleep while hiding out on escape routes to an implausible freedom? You made her believe in every seed braided into the crown of messengers before uncertain passengers. A love note to future generations, a grain of hope. Somewhere, somehow, there would be soil that would open to receive our prayers and multiply. We are descendants of futurists who do not give up on the possibility at least one seed would survive. The endless tides of transatlantic crossing auction blocks, monocrop cotton, razor-sharp sugar, the scalding sun, the harvest of salt, and burning crosses. Hidden propagation in forbidden gardens, generations of dehydration and bondage. Summoning softness from the clouds, our bodies are made of water and promise. Our mothers' mothers did not give up on the possibility at least one seed would make its way through layers of cold, hard, rocky silt and sand and clay. And in the face of great danger, soften its shell, open its hull, extend a tender root, find water and food, trusting there is light somewhere enough to bloom. A flower comes before fruit. Love precedes a child. Someone was dreaming of you. Ashe. So I am excited to share information with you about the history and legacy of Black farming. Listen, I love to grow food. I fell in love with growing food after working in a program. I used to be a community school coordinator, and part of my responsibilities was to help launch a program of food growing with the parents at my school. And I thought, well, I'll just sit on the sidelines and watch everybody else grow and just be there just to say that I'm there. And then as we started growing, I fell in love. I had a small pot with jalapeno peppers, sage, basil, and some chives. And once that little jalapeno pepper started popping, I was hooked. I couldn't believe that something that my hands touched grew from this seed and grew into a flower and blossomed into this beautiful plant and also fruit. So I am, of course, Black Farmer Bay. I own a little record store. Anybody ever been to my record store? Oh, thank you so much. That was launched out of a dream of just kind of doing what I wanted to do. I wanted to chase my dreams and catch them, and so I did. I also am a DJ. One of my favorite things to do is to spin records and also get the party crunk, get it popping. I shared with you on why I grow food, and the reason is more than just healthy food. Excuse me, just one moment. It's more than just healthy food. It's about honoring our ancestors and elders as we grow food through our hands. In May of 2019, I decided to turn my backyard from a crime scene to an actual garden. When I bought my house, it's a two-level home, two-tiered backyard. And the bottom tier looked like that, crime scene. And so what I decided to do was tear down the fence, build a new fence. I started with, again, one little pot with a few herbs and some jalapeno peppers, and I manifested this. So this was a lot of work. However, to be able to go into your backyard and get this beautiful fruit, these beautiful vegetables, and to make something, I live near 28th Street if anyone's familiar with that, 28th Street and Eastern. So it's a very urban, congested area, but I was bound and determined to create something beautiful. And I named my garden Sankofa Garden. Sankofa is an Adinkra symbol, and it means to go back and get it. What that means is to learn from your past, bring that knowledge forward, and use it to go into the future. So I definitely did that in creating Sankofa Garden here. I currently have 12 raised beds in my garden. The things I grow, watermelon, pickles. Anybody ever taste Adela's Delightful Dill pickles? They're very popular here. I'll let you all know when they're coming again. So I actually grow organic pickles, and I make the brine and also sell that to the community. That's one of my hobbies. I also grow tomatoes, different types of peppers, and I'll also show you some different seeds from some very important ancestral peppers a little bit later. So growing your own food is magical. It's priceless. When you walk into a grocery store, um, you see this beautiful fruit and veggies, and they do some doctoring of those fruits and vegetables just so they are pretty in the store. If you've ever noticed, sometimes food in the stores, the produce will rot quicker than usual. The reason being is because they are putting preservatives and additives into those to again make them look pretty. However, I found with my organic produce that it lasts a lot longer stored in my crisper drawer in my refrigerator than food that is or the produce that is in local grocery stores. No additives, no preservatives, nothing to alter the taste or anything. Sometimes in grocery stores, they talk about, you can buy organic foods. However, if you're not buying certified organic foods, you're not truly buying organic foods. The USDA has a lot of different caveats and different things of that nature that can make things sound good, but they're not very good. Sometimes when we think we're eating, plant-based foods and things of that nature, unfortunately, the prepared kind, they will add a lot of sodium and different things to create flavor for that. So we have to be careful when we're eating that kind of stuff too. So I showed you my before and after pictures. What I'd like to do now is just find out a little bit about who's in the room. It's not something that you have to answer any questions about. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, that's fine. I just want to know if anybody has any experience with food growing or ancestral food growing or anything they'd like to share about growing experiences. Yes.
I never. Hello, everybody. My name is China. I am engaging to be like a family engagement specialist here in Grand Rapids. I myself am interested in forcing more community gardens in the city of Grand
Mhm.
Rapids. More community based. We the people. We the people.
Absolutely.
Um, I don't have very much experience with growing food, but house plants galore. So my goal is to, Sankofa, do it scared. Um, but I just came because I feel a strong correlation. If I can keep 40, 50 plants alive, why not go towards the food and
Hmm.
continue to grow in that
For
direction?
sure. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm coming.
Hello, everyone. My name is Linnea Tynes. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, and I moved to the side of Michigan. So I have a lot of history with growing in general. Me and my family, we tend to make community gardens in Detroit, Benton Harbor, and even in Grand Rapids, little ones. We work with Kwanzaa 365, Mama Jewel, her, Crystal Tunstall, John L. And yeah, I just want to learn more about how to grow because I can do a garden, I can do farming, but like indoor plants, I don't know. We have beef.
Thank you. Anyone else? We'll take one or two more.
I'm Shauna Thomas. I'm a student journalist at GRCC for the Collegiate. And I only have a little history with planting because one of my friends, her mom came from Mexico, and she only plants all the stuff that they eat. So that was my introduction to the like planting vegetables and fruits and stuff. And my grandfather, he also has history with planting stuff. So I came here because I wanted to learn more about it and possibly get into doing it, and also having house plants too in the future.
Thank you. One more person? Anybody else? No pressure.
Hi, my name is Tamika Dudley. I'm a proctor here at GRCC. I've spoken at your record shop. Um, I'm interested in farming. I live in an apartment I live in downtown Grand Rapids. We have no grass. No grass. Help.
Gotcha. Thank you. All righty, we're going to move right on, but I want to stop. The pictures that I use in this presentation are very intentional. This is a picture of Josephine Baker. Anybody heard of Josephine Baker before? Yes, Josephine Baker was an entertainer in the 20s and 30s. And, she had these beautiful costumes that she wore and nightlife and doing things of that nature just to, show off her talents. But she was also a food grower. And this is Josephine Baker actually watering her collard greens in the 1930s. So I have a few program objectives, blah, 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 et cetera, but we'll get in the meat of things. But I want to make sure that that information is shared on how enslaved Africans brought seeds to America and some of the types of seeds they brought to the country, how Black farmers played an instrumental role in the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, explain a little bit about how Black farming declined in the 1980s, and also share the importance of Black people reclaiming their roots by growing their own food, especially culturally relevant food. And when I say culturally relevant food, food that we brought over when we were enslaved, that we brought over to America, and I'll tell you how those seeds were brought over. So let's get started, and I'm going to take you on a journey about the history and legacy of Black farming. So when enslaved Africans were brought to this country, they brought with them crops like sugarcane, beans, watermelon, yams, collard greens, and rice. So, of course, they weren't the actual fruits. They were actual seeds. The seeds were braided into the hair of African women. Now, how did they know to do this? They knew something was going on. They didn't know exactly what. When Africans were in their country and, living their lives, they were stolen. And so they knew something was happening. And so they wanted to prepare themselves so that we would have things to eat. They didn't know what was happening. However, when someone comes and violently steals you, they know it's not a good thing. So braiding seeds into hair was one of the ways that they brought those seeds over to America. And what I want to do is I want to share with you, and you can pass this around. This is a Carolina African runner seed. This is the original American peanut. Africans brought peanuts to America. We are the ones that made sure that peanuts were here in America. So the seeds in this package, I took a few out just so that you could see them, originated from those actual seeds braided into African women's hair. So every seed that is in fruition today came from those particular batch of seeds. Why is that important? How many people knew that Africans were the true originator? All right, great, that's amazing. And so each year I grow Carolina African runner seeds in my garden. And I started actually growing peanuts because some little squirrel or rabbit or some other animal brought a seed into my garden and dropped it. And then I noticed this little plant that I had not planted start growing. Come to find out, I pulled it up because I thought it was a weed and found a peanut seed at the end of the weed. and I started doing research, and that's how I became familiar with the Carolina African runner peanuts. It is so beautiful to actually hold those seeds in your hand and think about the stories behind those seeds. Who carried them? How they got here? Where were they planted originally? How were they harvested? So it's a beautiful thing. It's more than just food. There's a lot of history in our foods. Also, did you know that Africans brought watermelon seeds with them? And once here in America, we were shamed for eating watermelon. It was actually considered a very special and important and a very rich food. So whenever someone shares that, like those awful pictures that show African Americans eating watermelon, that's not correct. It's actually a very awesome fruit that we brought to the Americas. So, how did those seeds get planted that were braided in the hair of African women? So, plantation owners did not allow enslaved Black people to actually have areas to plant their seeds. What they did is they found hidden areas on the plantation land, and they created gardens. Now, these plantation areas were very dark. The soil was bad. Not a lot of access to water. However, that's just a testament to the type of people we are. We can grow through concrete. We can make anything grow. We can survive any type of matter. So they would grow these seeds in very undesirable areas on plantations. If they were allowed a spot to grow food on plantations, they were not allowed to grow with the food that they were growing for the families that they were at the plantation. They weren't allowed to grow their own food. Remember, some of the growing places were hidden plots, and that's the only way that many of us survived, is because we had these hidden spaces where we were growing food. Like I said, unfortunately, we were given straps to just barely survive. And so think about trying to feed an entire family, and all you had was leftovers or scraps or things that weren't good for your health. So, after enslavement ended, which it really didn't end, it just changed. In the 1800s, Black people were offered a reparation of 40 acres and a mule. Did we ever get 40 acres and a mule? Absolutely not. And so we had to figure out how we were going to survive afterwards. Thank you. What we decided to do, let me move back. So if we received 40 acres and a mule, that would give us a level playing field. And they did not want us to have a level playing field because that would generate wealth for us, right? And we would be able to do a lot more things if we had that opportunity. We would be more self-sufficient, and that was not what they wanted us to be. We would be able to build homes, businesses, and also grow more food. People in power don't want to share power. However, we're very resilient and can make $1 out of 15 cents. Even though America did not honor its promise to give us 40 acres and a mule, we still found ways to purchase land. We created communities in those spaces. We grew our own food, we built our own businesses, we cared for each other, and we shared our abundance with each other. I want to move a little bit forward as I take you on this timeline of the history and legacy of Black farming to Booker T. Washington and Tuskegee University. Anybody familiar with Booker T. and Tuskegee University? Ever heard of it at all? So Tuskegee University was an agricultural college. And Booker T. Washington, he was placed in charge of a plot of land that is now considered Tuskegee University. From the ground up, he, along with Black community members and future students, built the school. So they started from nothing and built the school. They designed and constructed the classrooms as well as the dormitory buildings and a large farm that had animals as well as plants. The goal of the school was to teach Black people self-sufficiency. There's so many Kwanzaa principles that are placed into this method here that he used. Collective responsibility, building and maintaining our communities, and self-determination. So Booker T. Washington believed that Black people would thrive if they were able to own their own land, buy their own, or raise their own produce and animals and things like that. And so he was right. That gave us a one-up. So as we move a little bit forward to the 1910s, the 1940s, sharecropping. Anybody heard of the term sharecropping? Anybody familiar with sharecropping? Okay. So this is how many Black people supported their families, through sharecropping. And basically, there are three types of sharecropping. Sharecroppers were assigned to work a plot of land, and in exchange, they were required to give the landowner a share of the crop at the end of the season, usually half of the crop, which is a lot of the crop. The landowner provided the tools, the seeds, and the farm animals. The second type of sharecropping, for those of Black Americans who own their own mule and plow, were considered tenant farmers. And tenant farmers paid the landowner less, usually only 1/3 of the crop. The last, some sharecroppers were able to purchase their own seeds, tools, and fertilizer on credit from a local merchant. At harvest time, the sharecropper would harvest the whole crop and give a portion of the crop to the merchant to pay the debt. Do any of these areas seem viable? Any of these sharecropping ways seem viable to actually become self-sufficient? Absolutely not. Because one thing about food growing is you never know what your harvest will be. Some years you can have a very plentiful harvest. In other years, you may not have that. So if you have to give a merchant half of your crop, that could be a lot of food, and you won't be able to have much for your family. Also, there were a lot of lopsided contracts. We didn't know what we didn't know. Therefore, when it was time to cash in, we always ended on the lower end of the spectrum and not the higher end. Fortunately, with the sharecropping method, we were able to make enough food to feed grow enough food to feed our families. One area that I have spent a lot of time studying and learning about is the civil rights movement. I am very interested in how the civil rights movement has changed our world. I look at how things are going now and the different ways that there are boycotts planned and other things of that nature. And I look towards the civil rights movement and how ancestors and elders changed the world through their protest. So one thing that is very amazing to me is that during the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, Black farmers allowed protest marchers, to stay on their land for rest. They also allowed the marchers to eat produce from the crops that they grew. Why was this important? It was the 1950s and the 1960s, and unfortunately, Black people were not welcomed in hotels, weren't welcomed in a lot of retail spaces, and were not welcomed in restaurants. And so in order for us to have food as well as a place to rest, Black farmers were very instrumental in making sure that these marches occurred for freedom. Black farmers also provided a safe haven. they watched out for us. They made sure we were well fed. They made sure that it was one of the first signs of building community and creating something that would last. At my record store on the side of the building, there is a mural of Fannie Lou Hamer, as well as information about growing food, as well as a lot of other things. What's important about that space is because when I moved into it, I knew it was my space just because it had a picture of Fannie Lou Hamer painted on the side of the building, as well as Fred Hampton, who was a member of the Black Panther Party. So Fannie Lou Hamer was a voting and civil rights activist, and she was also a Black farming activist. She was very important in the civil rights movement and also creating farm space. She founded the Black Freedom Farm Collective in Mississippi in 1969. This cooperative sought to uplift Black people through food provisions such as vegetable gardens and pig raising. What she did is she was able to raise $8,000. Now, this is, again, in the 1960s, 1970s. She was able to raise $8,000 and purchase 40 acres of land from a Black farmer who could not continue to upkeep his property. What's important about that is that 40 acres that we were promised and never received, this number was significant for her. And so she raised those dollars so she could make sure and buy this land. And on this land, they established this agricultural organization where food was grown for the community. Pigs were raised, also cows and other animals, because one important thing is we always have to have food to sustain us. And so it's very important to make sure that we find ways to have food to sustain us. And she was doing something very, very amazing at a time where there was a lot of overt racism and discrimination and things of that nature. After Fannie Lou Hamer transitioned, unfortunately, the land was repossessed, per se, and it was given to other folks. It's so unfortunate because we didn't have a lot of paperwork and a lot of information that could have proven that the land belonged to certain people. And so, government officials, city officials were able to find some sort of loophole in order to take the land away from us. So we talked a little bit about Booker T. Washington, but I want to talk a little bit more about Booker T. Whatley, who is the founder of Community Supported Agriculture. Anyone familiar with Community Supported Agriculture? Okay. Anybody want to share their knowledge about Community Supported Agriculture? No pressure. So community supported agriculture is a bartering system, per se. It started out that way, where community members would grow food for each other and they would exchange different things. Let's say, for instance, one family grew collard greens, kale, and another family grew strawberries and watermelon. And what they would do is they would grow food for each other and then they would exchange it where no money was exchanged. Also, the same thing was done with animal farming as well. So pigs and chickens, as well as cows, they would barter and give each other their fruit and their animals, because it was important for them to be able to be self-sufficient and barter and not have to exchange money. So now there are several areas today where there's community supported agriculture, where you can buy into food clubs or you can buy into different programs and buy in bulk, or you can barter and trade different foods with others who grow food as well. It's kind of like a membership club. It's kind of like a Sam's Club for produce and dairy and meat growers. One of the best things about this is, even though there wasn't a lot of financial gain, it made sure that there was food for people to eat. And now there is a lot of money involved with community supported agriculture, because it does take a lot of money to run a farm and to grow food. So I want to take you up to the decline of Black farming in the 1980s. Unfortunately, a lot of our land was stolen from us. Again, laws, rules, norms, values, paperwork. There were ways. What they did is they made it so that we weren't able to have records of our farmland. Or they'd say, well, we need to take your land because it goes through a certain trail and it's historical land, and so it belongs to us. And so we had no way of fighting that. So that's one of the reasons we lost our land. And we had limited access to capital as well. Not a lot of generational wealth for Black families. We couldn't sustain because there was a lot of responsibility that needed to go into taking care of a farm. When we were given freedom and began to buy land, white farmers would take our land, burn our land, or they would, do something harmful to our people because they did not want us to succeed or survive. And that's very unfortunate. Between 1910 and 1997, Black people lost 98% of their farmland. Today, of the 3.4 million farmers in the United States, only 45,000 are Black. And this is according to the USDA, and it's down from 1 million from a century ago. Can you share some reasons, besides what I've shared also, of why farming declined for Black people?
People of African American people of color. So only European American-based people were allowed to have those finances and equipment for years.
Absolutely. Any others?
Much kind of monopolize seeds and seeds.
Any other thoughts?
Yes.
Knowledge. People just don't have knowledge, information.
For sure.
Sure. I think what's important to note at this junction is that we had to learn everything once we got here. A lot of our cultural norms were lost, and we did not have an opportunity to practice a lot of our norms and values because we would be punished for that. They wanted us to be Americanized, and in doing that, we were beaten and punished for exercising any type of our asserting rights or talking about our culture, to dancing, music, anything of that nature. And so they wanted to lessen us. And so in doing that, a lot of our culture was lost. And so we're reclaiming our culture now. It's disheartening because we went through so much, and now we are trying to reclaim our roots. I want to move a little bit forward to the importance of reclaiming our roots, food growing, and growing culturally relevant food for ourselves. Again, a lot was lost, and we're trying to rediscover who we are. Seeds braided in hair, planted in disturbed areas, unclean areas, and also areas that were with toxic soil and not a lot of water, not a lot of sun. And imagine still growing through those conditions. That says a lot about Black people in general, that we're able to grow through lots of tragic things. So the skill of food growing is very important, and it's very important to tell our stories about food growing. You think about how many of us knew, again, I asked this question earlier, how many of us knew that seeds were braided in the hair of African women and brought to the Americas? And some of us didn't know that. That's how some of our food got here. A lot of people have stolen I won't say stolen. Yes, I will. They've stolen what we've done and they have portrayed it as being their own. And that's very incorrect. There's a lot of information in history books that's incorrect because the stories were not told by us. They were told by other people. And so a lot of our history and culture has not been told or written. And so it's so very important that we learn these stories and we learn our history so that we can continue to share this with generations to come. The skill of farming is a very, very hard thing. And I say hard because you have to be committed to growing food. When you start growing your plants, you have to take care of them like they're your children. They desire water, love, nurturing, pruning, sunlight. They require a lot. However, what you put into your harvest, what you put into your plants will make your harvest beautiful. I have had a lot of losses in my garden, but I've also had a lot of wins. I shared earlier and showed you the Carolina African Runner peanuts. And to have those peanuts brought over from Africa, braided in the hair of enslaved African women, growing in my garden, is something special. It's beautiful. When you harvest them and you think of the stories that were carried in those seeds, in those braids, in that person's body as they came to America. It's important to teach the skill of farming because that's going to help us to be healthier in our journeys. You know what you put into your soil. You know what you put into growing your food. It's important when you buy seeds that you buy seeds that are non-genetically modified, organic, certified organic, because organic and certified organic are two different things. You decide what type of fertilizer you put in. I love to use compost fertilizer. That's scraps from old food, composted and mixed during time. Smells awful, as you can imagine, old food contained in a bin, sweating, and I see your face. Yes, it is pretty bad. However, it's good for us. Also, I use a process called, I use a vermicompost. Anybody ever heard of vermicompost? There is an organization here, Wormies Vermicompost. I use them. I always refer people to Wormies. Worms are good in our gardens. They create great fertilization. They help to keep our soil moist and healthy. And they also help to, they keep going, they keep making. And so they're staying in our gardens and making it more beautiful and making it more plentiful for us. So moving on, creating access to healthy foods in community gardens. I will build a community garden anywhere. I have built community gardens anywhere. Next to my store on Kalamazoo, there's this alley. And I thought, I could probably grow some food here. I solicited the community to help, and fortunately, a lot of community members donated. And the great thing about that is that's building community. And there's no red tape with that. There's no, we got to get, we need to see your license. We need to see how many people live in your home. We need to see your income. In this community garden next to my record store, it is you need it, you want it, you take it. So my assistant and I, alongside our building, built garden beds. We built 4 garden beds. And in those garden beds, we grow collard greens, kale, tomato, lavender. Anybody use lavender? We grow mustard greens, some very unique tomatoes. They're called green zebra tomatoes. And so what makes me proud about that is people will walk along the street and they'll say, hey, how much is your produce at the store, at the, the garden? It's like, it's free. You take it. It's yours. Well, what can I do? I always say there's something you can do. You can prune. You can water. I believe that no matter what your situation is or your needs, if you are, a lot of people receive help, and that's okay. But I do believe that no matter what your circumstances are, you can always give back. So they can come and water, prune, and of course, harvest food from the garden. Food growing is good for self-sufficiency. People will sometimes say the end of the world is coming. Listen, I don't know when it's coming, okay? But what I do know is if things pop off, my family and I are eating, and we are eating well. It's just, I think it's so important for our kids to know where food comes from. They think it comes from the store or it's just in the pot that we eat. But if they can see where it comes from and how it grows, they'll get more interested in food and how it nourishes their bodies. I shared earlier about being an ancestral grower. It is important for me to find seeds from the African diaspora to grow here in my garden. So each year there are specific seeds that I grow, and I brought some of them with me, and I want to show you. The first are honey peppers by Horace Pippin. Anybody ever heard of Horace Pippin? So on the cover, you will see these are some of the prettiest peppers that I've ever seen in my life. So they grow from dark purple, and then they transition to green, and then yellow, and then orange, and then red. And so they're these big, meaty peppers. So they say sweet peppers, but all peppers have a little kick to them, right? So let me tell you a story about Horace Pippin. Horace Pippin was a folk artist and a food grower. And so Horace Pippin had arthritis in the 1940s, right? And back then, they thought that bee stings would cure arthritis. I don't know. I'm not trying to try that, okay? So what happened is Horace Pippin had a friend, William Woys Weaver, who was a beekeeper. And so back then, they were really big on the bartering system. And so what Mr. Pippin and William Woys Weaver did was they exchanged seeds for bees. So Pippin gave William Weaver a jar of seeds, and they were labeled Horace Pippin. What happened is William Woys Weaver never grew those. He put them in a deep freezer in his garage. I really want to know if the bee stings actually work, but there's no way of finding out right now. So one day after William Woys Weaver transitioned, his son was cleaning out his home and found this jar of seeds in the deep freezer in the garage. Now this is years later, like 20 years later. So he was a grower, so he decided to plant them and did some research and found out what these seeds were. And so He found honey pepper. He named those honey peppers after Horace Pippin. They're Horace Pippin's honey peppers. He also discovered a Buena Mulata pepper. Buena Mulata peppers are long and thin, and they are deep purple, and they turn to a salmon color, and then they turn red. And also, there's one more type of seed that was found in that jar. The Buena Mulata pepper, the honey pepper, and the fish pepper. So the fish pepper is one of the most beautiful peppers I've ever seen. It's striped like a candy cane, and it's so variegated in color with its leaves and things like that. And so every Buena Mulata pepper, every fish pepper, and every honey pepper in existence can be traced back to that jar found in William Moyes Weaver's deep freezer. I just pause here because that's a big deal. And it shows us how things continue to travel and the legacy and the things that we can get from keeping seeds. And remember, we didn't have a lot of money. And so there's a process called seed keeping, where we take the seeds, we dry them out from an actual pepper or tomato or another type of fruit or vegetable, and we will store them in cool, dark places so that the next season we can plant them. So imagine how much money is saved through seed keeping and how inexpensive it is to seed keep. Imagine a bell pepper. When you cut that bell pepper open, remember, one seed grew a bell pepper plant, which could yield 10 to 12 bell peppers, right? So when you open up a bell pepper, guess how many seeds are in there? There's probably at least 100 in each bell pepper. So imagine from one bell pepper, you have 100 seeds, and you have the plants that can grow from those seeds, and they keep multiplying and on and on and on. So that legacy just keeps going and going and going. I also want to share with you a seed. I wanted you to see that picture of Horace Pippin on there. This is actually called a Paul Robeson tomato. So when you think about tomatoes, you think about your basic cherry tomatoes, your beefsteak tomatoes, the tomatoes that you see in the grocery store, right? Can anybody guess how many varieties of tomatoes there are? A lot is a good answer. There are a lot. Any other guesses? Okay. There are more than 500 varieties of tomatoes. And we can create new varieties of tomatoes. We can create new varieties of fruit by crossbreeding fruits. So you think about something like basil, which is an herb. And not only is there just basil, but there's cinnamon basil, there's lemon basil, and that's from crossbreeding it with another plant, like a lemon. So there are new strains of fruits and veggies created each and every day in labs sometimes, and some very organically. But this is a Paul Robeson tomato. Paul Robeson was an entertainer, and he was a Russian civil rights activist. And so this particular tomato was named after Paul Robeson. So when you cut in the tomato, you see the seeds in the tomato, right? So those are what you plant into the ground to get more tomato plants. And the Paul Robeson tomato is, I don't love tomatoes. This is one of the best tomatoes I've ever tried before in my life. It's very smoky and sweet, and it's it stays green, but it gets this red hue around it. It's very beautiful and very tasty. And I love these ancestral seeds because that helps me to better understand the journey of my people. It helps me to reclaim my heritage, reclaim my roots that that were lost. It's so important for us to know who we are, where we come from, and so we have to do a lot of research in order to find that out. Anybody grow food here? They grow food. Okay, tell me your methods of growing. Do you grow in ground? Do you grow in raised beds? Okay, okay. Anybody else want to share? Okay, nice. So sometimes people say, I can't grow food. I live in an apartment, or I'm not good at growing food. Guess what I grow my tomatoes in? Can anybody guess? And if you know me, don't tell anybody. Can anybody guess what I grow my tomatoes in? Okay, pot. Clay pot. Okay. Okay, these are good. And okay. I actually grow my tomatoes in paint buckets. So you ask me, okay, the buckets that you actually paint, you put paint in? Absolutely. So what I do is I go to the Home Depot and I get food grade buckets. Important to get food grade buckets because, we don't know what that other stuff is made of in the buckets. So the food grade buckets, they're typically white, some are orange. And basically what I do is I drill a couple holes in the bottom because there needs to be drainage. If there's no drainage in your plants, it could cause mold and destroy your plants. So I drill a couple holes in the bottom, fill it with soil and leaves. Leaves are actually a very good mulch for your soil. So old leaves, instead of throwing those away, you can put them in your garden beds or plants or your plant spaces. Yes. It does protect the soil. It protects from walking away, but there's a lot of nutrients in those dead and dying leaves. I did something not on purpose this year, but the universe decided it was going to snow before all of my leaves fell off my tree. So I was not able to get my leaves up before the snowfall. And typically people are like, well, if you don't get your leaves up, it could kill your grass, it could cause mold, it can do a lot of other things. So I wanted to do an experiment. Now I'm very particular about my lawn. I'm the woman on the block that has an imaginary keep off my lawn sign, and everybody knows that. I spend a lot of money. I love green grass. I love, just a very aesthetically pleasing garden aesthetically pleasing yard. And so this year I wasn't able to get them up. So I'm like, well, let's see how this works out. So I was able to finally get those up. My yard was not damaged. It's a little brown, but of course, but I am looking forward to seeing how that impacts my my yard going forward this season. But there are a lot of nutrients in your dead leaves, so you can use that and put it in your compost as well. There. So, paint buckets. If you have sun, you can grow food. And if you have a space, you can grow food. So for folks that live in apartments, paint buckets. Also, they have the long kind of garden boxes, the rectangular ones. I actually place 3 different things in those. I'll plant herbs in those. You can also use old trash cans. You can use laundry baskets. Anybody else growing unique things?
One of the things that I use are, I don't know what to call them, but basically metal wash basins that I've drilled holes into, and I grow a lot of like sage and different spices or things in that sort of.
Nice, very nice. You don't have to go to the store, the Home Depot or Lowe's, and fill your cart up with a bunch of different things. You do need special tools to grow your food. And some of those tools are, a trowel, a shovel. You definitely want to have good soil. You have to start with good soil. That's the foundation for growing. It's important when you are deciding what soil to purchase that you're reading your labels. Sometimes they put stuff in soil that's pretty awful. Pencils, plastic, yeah, trash. I encourage you, if you are going to grow food and want to grow food, to read the labels and also buy certified organic soil. I typically buy Miracle Grow Performance Organics. You can find that locally at Home Depot. You can find it also at Lowe's, and you can also order it online. Because remember, what you start with, you have to give it a good foundation. So let's talk a little bit about my honey journey. Why I decided to start beekeeping. Did anybody guess why I started beekeeping as a gardener? Pardon? For pollination. Any other reasons? The challenge. I do like a good challenge every now and then. I do it for the honey. So one thing about beekeeping is bees make honey for themselves. They don't make it for us. They actually create the honey so that they could eat it in the wintertime. And they'll share with us. So becoming a beekeeper is very interesting for a person who used to be afraid of bees. Bees sting. However, only the girl bees sting. The boy bees don't sting you. The pollination is wonderful. My garden last year was more fruitful because I had bees, and they were hanging around and pollinating my plants. Some plants don't need pollination. They're self-pollinating. Anybody know what plants those are? Anybody name one? A self-pollinating plant? Take a guess. Pardon? No.
Greens? Greens?
Tomatoes.
Yes. Peppers are self-pollinating. That means that they do some magic within their plant makeup, and they're able to pollinate so that fruit is created. And when I say fruit, I mean the peppers. Typically with a pepper plant, you will have tons of peppers on those plants, depending on how happy they are with each other, how happy the plant is with itself. But yes, bees help with pollination, and they also help with creating honey. I want to stop. I've given you a lot of information so far, and I want to see if anybody has any questions at all. Yes.
So the best route to go is to get organic, 100% organic fruits and vegetables, and then move accordingly to continue the organic pipeline, so to say, instead of, going to the grocery store, get bell peppers, and then harvest the seeds from there.
If I could give you any advice, it would be never grow from store-bought foods, because you don't know what was used to grow those foods. You don't know the soil, the temperature, you don't know the farmer, you don't know what they use. With the food industry, there's a lot of, and I'll give you an example to make it a little bit relatable. Organic and certified organic. So you just don't know what people are doing. When we hear organic, we're like, oh, this is great. This is good for us. But organic, certified organic is a different level in a category that different things have to be checked off in order for it to be certified. So we're not sure what's gone into those foods and growing those foods in the grocery store. What I encourage you to do, if you search for organic, certified organic seeds, non-GMO seeds, you can find those online, and I would plant those. And I would save the seeds by drying out the seeds from at least 1 or 2 pieces of fruit. I typically, if I'm going to save seeds from a plant, what I'll do is I will let those get to past peak of ripeness, just to make sure that I'm getting the best quality. And so after that, I'll dry out the dry out the seeds. I'll take them out, put them on a paper towel, let them sit there for a couple days. And after that, I'll put them in a paper envelope and I'll label them and I'll put them in a cool, dry place. And seeds, typically seeds will last for about 5 to 7 years, even though I found some more viable. And also remember that story with Horace Pippin, how those were decades old seeds and they were still very good and still producing to this day. Other questions?
Coming.
Getting you a workout today.
Hi.
So you know how like do you have like certain sites that you use to know like when you supplant certain items, like, and if you go like if it's past the time where they say you should start planting these seeds at this time, like would you still plant them anyway just to give it a go and see if it works out? And also, do you have what's the key to plant? Do you plant onions? Because I've planted some onions and they just, I don't know what, they never came.
Gotcha. I'll break that down. I'll first start with the onion question. Onions need a deep container because they have a long root system. And so you'll need lots of soil. You'll need it to have a lot of area to grow, and you'll want to plant it deep enough so that it gives it a chance to expand and grow. And also, if you plant something in a shallow root container, it's going to stunt the growth of your plant. So you want to make sure you have enough room for those roots to grow. And then to remind me of your next question.
The best time frame to start planting certain items, and like if it's past that time, or you look online like you should start these in March, and if it's like past March, would you still plant it anyway to see if it'll grow?
Absolutely. I am a trial and error grower. I have been told you cannot grow loofah in Michigan. Guess who grew loofah in Michigan? Anybody know what loofah is? Loofah is the sponge that we wash. And loofah is also a vegetable. And many Korean families eat loofah before it gets to that hardened stage. So yes. Also, unfortunately, Michigan has a very short growing season. We have about 120 days. And so many people, like myself, we start our plants indoors under grow lights. And the importance of that is it allows me to transplant those plants into my garden already started as a plant. So I'm transplanting actual plants that I grew from seeds. And so that'll help them to grow fast. Well, not grow faster, but make in time so that when the weather turns bad, I'll be able to harvest my veggies and get the things that I need. Things like peppers, watermelon, and several other veggies need about 120 to 130 days in order to become harvestable. And so when you start them indoors, you're giving them a head start so that when the weather warms up here in Michigan, we can plant them outdoors already with 8 to 10 weeks of growth. So we've already killed 70 some days. Did you have one more question, Tiffany? Oh, okay. Go ahead. So I'm not a hydroponic gardener. I am the type of gardener I like as natural as possible. So I don't do a lot of canning or freezing or drying out of my veggies because I love them to be fresh and in its natural state. And so most of my produce, probably more than half, I actually give away because I want people to have fresh foods. The only thing that I can, per se, are my pickles, just because, those get better with time in that brine. Just living and dancing and okay. Yes.
So like when you go into like grocery stores, I know you see like a lot of seedless like vegetables and fruits. So what's your thought on the whole like seedless fruit things?
Food should have seeds. There is some modifications being done in a lab somewhere. If you see things like watermelon and other veggies and fruits without seeds, that means someone is dissecting and doing some stuff and we just don't know what it is. Seeds are good things. I encourage you to buy seedless fruit. I'm sorry, I encourage you to buy seeded fruit not buy seedless fruit because that's going to be as natural as possible. While we're on this topic of food growing, anybody have any other questions about food growing? Yes. I'm sorry?
Do you have growing plots that people could lease for the summer, or are you familiar with that?
So I am. I do not have those. Anybody familiar with the organization SECOM? So SECOM, SECOM, they actually have plots that you can grow food. I believe they're about 4x8, pretty big plots. It escapes me where the location is. 1545 Buchanan. Yes, so I knew you would know. So yes, so if you can't have, if you don't have space or you want to do they do raised bed growing. And I'll tell you why I prefer raised bed growing, because I can control what goes into my soil. So if you're growing in ground, you're adding sometimes soil, you have, but still, the elements, the nature, you don't know if there's a lead level in your soil. You can get that tested. However, I prefer raised beds because I add my own soil to those. And also when I grow in my pots, I also add soil to those just so I know what's going in, the type of fertilizer and different things of that nature. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, child. Pesticides. Okay. So you hit this space in my heart. As a natural organic gardener, I spend hours keeping pests out of my garden. I have a fence. However, squirrels, cats, insects, birds, they don't care. They'll just jump up, right? So I use a variety of different things. I use a product called Diatomaceous Earth. I have a love-hate relationship with Diatomaceous Earth. It is like flour, and you sprinkle it on your plants and leaves, and it sucks the life, for lack of better words, out of insects. It hardens them. However, whenever you put water on your plants or it rains, you have to reapply. And for me, it was a daily thing because as I water my plants, sometimes I don't just get the root of the plant. Sometimes I get the leaves too. There is also the pepper method. Sometimes the squirrels will play in the pepper and eat it. And they're supposed to not like it and hate it because it's hot. I don't know what's going on with these squirrels here in Michigan, but they don't mind that pepper that I use, that cayenne pepper. The most effective and labor-intensive method is twice a day, I handpick bugs off my plants. And that's why I said it just, it's hard. In the morning and in the evening. Yes.
Okay. There is a copper grid system that I've seen people use where they will put like copper wires into the ground as well as like around their crops. And it's supposed to help keep like insects out and stuff because it makes this like magnetic field. Have you heard of this?
I have. Has not worked for me.
Okay.
I just think, honestly, you have to find what works for you. I mean, depending on your location and what your problem insect or animal is, you have to try to find the best way to deal with those. My problem insects are the aphids. So aphids will, within 24 hours, devour your leafy greens to the stem. They'll start as a little hole. You're like, oh, there's a little hole in the plant. The next day you come out, the whole leaf is gone. And they get bigger and bigger. These aphid wormy thingies, and those green. Anybody ever seen those green? They get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I look on the front and back of my leaves every day, twice a day, and pick those off hand by hand. And then I squish them and toss them into the earth. Yep, I squish them with my. You don't have to do that, but that way I know that they're dead and they're not coming back.
If you're able to, actually purchasing ladybugs. If you have plants in your garden that ladybugs love, aphids are like ladybugs will eat aphids.
Yes, ladybugs will devour aphids, and it's good for a small space. But I have a big space, so it's hard to make sure that there's enough ladybugs and they're doing what they're supposed to do. So I give me just 1 minute. I bought this tent. This was actually the best thing that I found, truly, but it was expensive and it's bulky and it's a lot of work and sometimes it likes to blow away. It looks like a pop-up laundry basket, but bigger. So it's that mesh material, and I stake it in over my raised beds. The only down part to that is I have these neighborhood cats, and my neighbor likes to feed the cats. So they hang out in my yard, which is right next door to him, right? And so they come and they knock them over, or the squirrels will knock them over, and that allows those little white butterflies. You know those? Those aren't cute. Those aren't our friends. Those are the enemies. Those butterflies lay those eggs under your leaves and create those little worms that eat through your plants. No, they devour your plants. So yeah, but it's just so many different methods, so much trial and error. You just have to see what works best. But what has worked best for me, like I said, is the most labor intensive, is going out twice a day and picking them off hand, one by one, and throwing them into the earth. You got a question?
Besides your bees, do you utilize any other animals in your garden?
Not yet, but this spring I'm getting chickens. And why did I choose to? So when you tell me I can't do something, I'm like, well, let me see if I can do it. Chickens for the eggs, but also I want a homestead. I really want a farm, but that's not in my foreseeable future right now. So I'm like, with what I have, what can I do? And so with that, that space I showed you earlier, did you all get to see that? Because you have to see it. You have to see what my garden space looked like before this crime scene here. And so I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Chickens, yes, I'm sorry. So on this bottom tier level here, okay, so this is this space here. And then across from it, it's an open space that I have mulched. And so I'm going to get my chicken coop, and I'm going to start with 2 chickens because I don't want one to be lonely. So yeah, and the goal is to get eggs as well, but I'm creating as much of it as an urban homestead as I can in the inner city. Any other questions? Yes.
Community garden, right?
Yes.
Where is that?
That is located at my record store, 1220 Kalamazoo here in Grand Rapids. There's also a really nice burger joint next door if you're into burgers. So yes, and this year we will also be expanding our community garden just because we can and we want to. And again, making vegetables accessible, fresh foods, good soil, right in the city of Grand Rapids. Before the construction at MLK Park, I actually managed and helped grow food at that community garden. But I believe that you can grow anywhere, in anything. I tap into the energy of my ancestors who grew in these plots that were not for growing. You think about old oils and no sunlight and lots of shade and no water, and they were able to produce fruitful gardens. So let's go through. I know we got a little bit off, but I'll talk about gardening, but that's okay because it's all about food growing, and I can do that all day long. But let's see if we answered our questions. Did we meet our... Can anyone share with me how enslaved Africans brought seeds to America and name a couple types of seeds they brought?
Do the women's braided hair and they brought peanut seeds.
Any other seeds we remember? Sure did. Yep. Can anyone explain how Black farmers played an instrumental role in the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s?
Yep. Providing a place for people to stay and food for them to eat. Mm-hmm. Stay strong during this time.
Absolutely. Can anyone share why Black farming declined in the 80s? Yep. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What's the importance of us reclaiming our roots by growing our own food, especially which is culturally relevant? Yes.
We become self-sufficient and we call back to our ancestors.
Yes. Anybody remember any of the seeds and the gentleman who all the seeds can be traced back to?
Booker T. Booker T.W.
What was it?
Booker T.W.
No, Booker T. Whatley he was community supported agriculture. Yes. Yes, Horace Pippin. Look at you. Yes. And food that's culturally relevant. So last year, I actually grew Crowder peas. I didn't know what a Crowder pea was, but it is a type of bean, and it's an heirloom seed. Anybody know what heirloom seeds are? Those are just saved seeds. So for instance, if I grow a pepper this year and I take some of the seeds and save it for next year and grow those, that means it's an heirloom. It's been passed down. So I'll read you a little bit. This particular variety was bred at Missouri State University in 1965 and was grown at the Sankofa Community Farm in Philadelphia by Miss Geneva's grandson, Chris Bolden Newsom, and his co-workers. Chris grew up shelling and eating Crowder peas with her in Greenville, Mississippi. Many light brown peas crowd into this lovely 6-inch silver-sheened, silver-pod baby bush plants. So I'll just pass those around. So you know the green beans that grow in the pods? Those are the beans we use to plant and grow more beans. So this is how the Crowder peas, they're not actual peas, they just call them peas, but they're actual beans. Okay. So anyone have any plans to start a garden this season? Great. What do you plan to grow? Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do that again. Peppers. I've done zucchini, tomatoes, the green tomatoes, fry those up, and I tried doing cilantro because I love cilantro, but that didn't work out. I tried to do the onions, but how you said I need to plant them deep. I did not plant them deep. They all washed up when it rained. But yeah, I'm gonna stick with what I know for now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else growing? Anybody a first-time grower this season? Great. So tell me what you want to grow.
I'm big on cooking, so I want to map out like in the summer like what actually do I eat the most. Like sweet potatoes, I know for sure. Like any type of potato almost is what my family goes toward.
Okay.
And they, reproduce so quickly. I feel like that would be a good direction to go.
Mm-hmm. I love growing potatoes. Sometimes when we see those little thorns coming out of our potatoes, we're like, oh, these are rotten, let's throw them away. Those are the ones that you grow because those little eyes in plants grows into a new plant and creates new potatoes. Yes.
Growing flowers over summer because that's something I always wanted to try. Because I have friends who did it. I had a friend who worked at a flower shop and she just started growing her own stuff. And I went to try growing lilies because they're like my favorite flowers.
Nice.
And I've seen a lot of them over the summer, and I have people in my neighborhood who also do grow them.
And there are some edible flowers too that you can grow. Nasartium. Yep. Anybody ever grown edible flowers? Yep, very good. Any other questions or thoughts? Yes.
Will you be expanding your community garden for more community members to take part? Will you have more listening sessions for us newbies that, may need a little bit more guidance on growing, even the difference of fruits and vegetables?
Yes.
Just learning sessions of everything.
Absolutely. I do once a season a food growing class at the beginning of, I apologize, at the middle of cool weather crop growing. And so there are two different types of crop growing. There's cool weather crops and there are warm weather crops. Cool weather crops flourish during the cooler temperatures. Those are going to be your leafy greens, your kales, your collards, lettuces, and different things of that nature. And those typically I'll grow, transplant those outside during Earth Week, which is the end of April. And then my warm weather crops, I transplant outside from the seeds under the grow lights. And I do that typically Mother's Day weekend or the weekend after that, because, you plant them after the last freeze in Michigan. And we've had last freezes in Michigan with 32 degree temperatures in May before. I've had to save my plants sometime because we had a late freeze in late May. And so what I did is I bundled them up in little blankets. And so I put blankets over my garden and I staked them in so that the wind wouldn't blow them away, so that I wouldn't lose my plants. Because if that frost or freeze touches your plants, it's going to kill them. Mm-hmm. But you can all follow me. Well, not follow me, but follow me to find out more about all the things that I do. These are just a few pictures of some of the things that I've grown. Do you see that squash there, that zucchini? It was the size of my hand in my home.
Zucchini, and then it rained for like 2 days straight, and I went out to check on it, and it was like massive. Was it the rain that did it, or is that just something that they do?
Rain is going to be the best water for your plants. It just depends on, the conditions of what's going on. What was the temperature like, the conditions of the soil, the rain, different things of that nature. You'll get, pardon? No, don't be scared. Eat that. Yep. Sometimes that happens. Like, sometimes you see in the store like these huge like carrots or huge tomatoes, and you're like, what's wrong with these veggies? And I don't know, they could be genetically modified veggies, but sometimes you'll get that in your garden too. Veggies sometimes just grow on their own terms and they do what they want to do. I planted from the same seed pack 2 different plants of peppers. So they came from, again, same seed pack, same lot, same everything. One plant produced like 50 peppers, the other produced 10. Sometimes there's just no rhyme or reason. Yeah. Sometimes I have pickles the size of, this size, and sometimes I have pickles the size of my arm. And sometimes they get lost in the leaves, or the conditions are favorable, something magical happens in the soil. I don't know. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I do tons of different types of vegetables. I do eggplants. I do, going through my beds now. What else? Yeah, but I do a lot of different types. I actually grew watermelon. There's actually a picture here, and you can see like there's some tiny little specks in the picture on the watermelon, the little yellow specks. So those are called moon and stars watermelons. And basically the rind is very deep green, and it has yellow specks that look like the moon and the stars on the watermelon. Really sweet, really good. And these are some of my collard greens that I've grown. Now listen. One thing I can do is I can grow some collard greens, okay? These collard greens are bigger than church fans. They're huge. And I have mastered the skill of growing collard greens. I also grow garlic. And garlic is a plant that you take an actual garlic clove, you plant it in the ground, and you do that in October, and you're able to harvest in July. So it does continue to grow during the fall, and then it goes dormant, meaning it's not growing during the wintertime, but then it picks right back up in the spring. And that one clove you plant turns into a whole bulb of garlic. It's the easiest thing to grow, doesn't take a lot of maintenance, a lot of water. But when you're growing food, it's so important to read the directions because each plant has a different type of directions. And, you never grow tomatoes with cucumbers. it'll be a mango disaster because each has a lot of leaves and vines and different things like that. So you'll look up companion planting. What's a good plant to plant with something else? How do you save space? I'm a vertical grower. I like to use a lot of trellising in my garden because that helps me to keep food off the ground and it keeps animals from getting to the food. And then too, sometimes that food gets heavy, those tomatoes and cucumbers and things like that get super heavy and they can weigh the plant down. With that trellising, it helps to give them just a little, it helps to hold that weight of those heavy fruits. Mm-hmm.
Let them just grow up.
Yes. I have to train them though, because plants are naturally ones that just grow on the ground. So I have to take the leaves as they start to grow and just kind of wrap them around the bottom, and then they just keep going. So I train them to do that. Any other thoughts or questions? The most interesting thing that I've grown, it'll probably be the loofah. That was great. Just watching it grow and then being able to actually use it. You know, you can buy them in the store and you never think that to grow things like that. Matter of fact, I didn't even know you could grow it until I did a little research. I've also grown strawberries, which are amazing. And you know, the strawberry seeds are located where? You're on the outside. So you get little tweezers and pick those off, and you can grow more strawberries from them. Please follow me on Instagram, or excuse me, on Facebook at Black Farmer Bay. And if you have questions or thoughts or feedback, you're welcome to email me at dellamarieLevi@gmail.com. And before we wrap, I want to just kind of go back to the importance of Black farming and share just how important this journey is to me. I think of all of the sacrifices that were made by my ancestors so that I could be in the space that I am now. Sometimes we get very weary fighting systems and working to get change. But I think about the systems that my ancestors fought in order to get change. I think about the Black farmers who grew so many crops to feed marchers while they were busy doing the hard work of fighting for rights and for civility. I think about those African women who knew that they would be stolen and taken and who had me in mind and future generations in mind, that they braided seeds in their hair so that they could carry some of their culture and food to a very foreign place. I think about children in fields picking cotton and trying to find joy in their lives and making sure that I take advantage of my freedoms here, even though America is far from being a perfect place. I am grateful that my ancestors and elders have taken the time to put in effort to make sure that I had a better life. My children have a better life, my children's children, and so on and so forth. Food nourishes us. It brings us together. It helps us to celebrate. It helps us to stay healthy. You think about all of our important occasions that we have. There's always food involved. And so it's so beautiful to be able to bring these ancestral foods from my garden and bring these stories and tell our own stories and not let anybody else tell our stories for us so that we have something to recapture what was lost during enslavement. So I thank you for sharing time and space with me today. Thank you for bearing with me today. I'm not in the best of health today, but this is my jam and I didn't want to miss this. And again, thank you so much for being here.
There is still some food if you guys would like some, room 122. And then if you didn't check in on your way in, please make sure to check in on your way out. Thanks, guys.